Okay. Good evening. Thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight, particularly at practically the end of COP27, the Sharm COP. My name is Orly Ronan. I'm the academic director of the Israeli Coastal Cities Forum and also a partner at the Tel Aviv University Climate Initiative. And tonight's session is organized in collaboration between the Forum of 15 cities and the Tel Aviv University. And it is not going to focus on solutions, although today is Solutions Day, but it is going to focus on instruments, on the instruments needed for coastal adaptation around the Mediterranean. We're going to look at the basis, the framework for coastal adaptation. First of all, understanding the hazards, then understanding and recognizing the vulnerability of our coastal systems, followed by creating the capacity of cities to adapt to climate change, and then finally looking at solutions. So we have an array of speakers tonight from different fields and different organizations, and I'm sure we'll have a fascinating session. So let's begin at the beginning by understanding the challenges that we're facing here around the Mediterranean, specifically in coastal cities. So I'd like to open the session with two experts. The Special Ambassador for Climate Change for Israel, Mr. Gidon Bachal, will be our first speaker, followed by Professor Colin Price, the head of the Tel Aviv University Climate Initiative, and also a world-known climatologist. So Gidon, please, the stage is yours.
Good evening, everyone. Shalom. It's really a pleasure to be here with you and to talk about climate change in the Mediterranean region, the Mediterranean Sea. In my presentation this evening, I would like to share with you an idea. The idea is that we should prepare ourselves together to sea level rise in the Mediterranean Sea. In other words, we should have Mediterranean sea level rise preparedness plan for all the countries of the Middle East. Now let's have a look at the Mediterranean Sea. The Mediterranean Sea is a very unique sea and very special one. You can see that it has lots of coast, lots of cities, it is heavily populated, and it has also many low-lying areas. What it means is that sea level rise in the Mediterranean will have devastating effects on the region, both physically but also on the inhabitants of the region. So remember that and bear that in mind. We are in the Mediterranean living in a spot which is very vulnerable to sea level rise. Now, it doesn't make sense that every country in the Mediterranean will prepare itself alone to sea level rise. It's not logic, because we need to create synergies between the different countries, between the different actors, between the different cities in the region. Only by preparing ourselves to sea level rise in the Mediterranean and working together that we will be able to withstand the huge challenges coming and arising from sea level rise. Now we know from the IPCC reports that sea level will be, for sure, almost 1 meter this century, with a possibility of even reaching 2 meters this century. Depends of how much water will be lost from the glaciers in Greenland and Antarctica. Now, another very important thing to remember is that even if we stopped emissions and emitting today, sea level rise will continue for centuries to go. It will not stop in 2100 or 2150 or 2200. It will continue. So we really have to prepare ourselves for that. What can be the major principles that will guide us for such a plan, a preparedness plan? Well, one of them is to have enough information. There are not enough measuring stations in. Okay, I have another 2 minutes. This is what you're saying? Okay, I'll finish in another 2 minutes. We do not have enough measuring stations in the Mediterranean. When they exist mostly in the European parts of it. They almost do not exist in the southern part of it, which is extremely important. So we need to have more means to gather information, and we need to share this information. Not only to share informations, but to share projections and models for the future. This is one thing. The second thing is that we have to develop risk maps for the Mediterranean, where sea level rise will be most felt, where it will have the most effect, where are big concentrations of people, of buildings, etc., that will be affected by the sea level rise in the Mediterranean. So we must have a vision of the negative effects of climate change on the region. And by having that, we will be able to develop a preparedness plan and prepare ourselves for the future. We need other parts or other elements in this preparedness plan should be also around preserving ecosystems, rehabilitating ecosystems, and working on them together, not only each country in its own national boundaries, but together to achieve it. The United Nations is calling us to protect 30% of all the waters and all lands by 2030, and this is also a goal for us here. So I would like to summarize my short presentation, or so short speech here this evening, by saying we should work together, we should prepare ourselves together, and this is the time to do it. All the countries of the Mediterranean together. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gideon. I'm going to go straight on without any introduction, save time. Next slide. So my name is Colin Price from Tel Aviv University. I'm heading the climate initiative. Oh, I have the clicker. Okay, so let's have a look at the Mediterranean. These are some of the major cities around the Mediterranean. You can see the population, the color and the size of the circle shows you the population from cities more than 10 million like Cairo, not too far from here. You can see in the yellows Tel Aviv and all the way around. And these are the cities which are threatened by climate change around the Mediterranean on the coastlines. And we're talking about coastal cities mainly in this session. So just to summarize the main three threats really to these cities on the Mediterranean. Here you can see a map of the heat stress, or the number of days where we're going to have above 37 degrees in around the Mediterranean. And basically we can see that for southern Spain, Turkey, Egypt, we can expect that by 2050 we're going to double the number of days above 37 degrees, going from 30 to 60. The three different maps are today, 2030, and I can't see that far, 2050. So heat. If we look at rainfall, here you can see model predictions from the IPCC of the changes in rainfall for every change in radiative forcing, or you can think of it as increases in carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And what we see clearly as the Mediterranean is predicted to have a decrease in rainfall. So it's going to get hotter, it's going to get drier. And here we can see the drought that's expected to become more prevalent in the Mediterranean in the future by 2050. So you can see today, the scale here is in percentages, the share of the decade where we're going to be in drought conditions. The redder it gets, the more drought conditions. So you can see all along the coastline from Spain to Greece, Turkey, and North Africa, a dramatic increase in the drought because it's going to get hotter and get drier. But we heard from Gideon about sea level rise, and I think this is actually the critical thing we need to focus on. Here you can see what's happened already from 1993 to 2014, the rise in sea level, the reds and yellows. We can see especially the eastern Mediterranean are rising faster than the western Mediterranean. In fact, some areas may actually be going down. But if you look at the predictions for the Mediterranean, it's shown at the bottom for the different scenarios of IPCC. Again, it's the more extreme scenario is up to 1 meter by the end of the century. But things don't stop at the end of the century. Keep on going. And this is the prediction for the next few hundred years. And it doesn't really matter which scenario we look at. By 2100, it's around about 1 meter. The big difference is what happens in 200 years or 300 years. And if we get to 2300, it's possible that it could be 4 or 5 meters rise in sea level globally. That's a huge increase in sea level. And some people say, well, the scientists are kind of overestimating. We always exaggerate things. Well, let's see what the predictions were in 1990 for the first IPCC report. That's what we have here. The gray wedge here is what the IPCC predicted in 1990 for sea level rise. And look what actually happened in reality, the blue line. The scientists were actually underestimating. So we could be overestimating, we could be underestimating, but we may, if we're talking about 5 meters in 200 years, that may be underestimation. And yesterday I heard IPCC reports, they're very worried about the melting of Greenland. Greenland's melting much faster than we expect. And we may be at this upper bound of 5 meters, maybe even 10 meters in 200 years if we don't do anything. The problem with sea level rise, we can't go backwards. If we decrease greenhouse gases, we can cool the climate again. We can return to normal rainfall, but we cannot lower the sea level again. We have to first cool the climate dramatically. We have to produce snow. We have to produce ice sheets, things which take tens of thousands of years. And it's not going to happen in the next 100 years. So when we look at risks in the Mediterranean, we've seen this in many places in this conference. You have the hazards. So that's the temperature, the rainfall, the sea level rise. You have the exposure of populations, the land use and development, infrastructures on our coastline, and we have the vulnerability of the population, the number of people, the political system, do we have democracy, is not, GDP, the health system, emergency services, all of these will basically tell us about the risks. And on the coastlines of the Mediterranean, the main risks really on these big cities are the ports. They're all ports. This is our supply lines of food, of everything coming into our cities. So we have the changes in the climate, but we have to look at the economic factors, operational factors, financial factors. Everything is interlocked here, and climate change is going to have this kind of domino effect, especially on the coastal cities, the big cities, which are actually our lifeline to other countries, our trade. Most of our trades come through our ports. Just one example before I finish of what this is going to do, even here in Egypt. This shows what will happen to Egypt with a 0.5 meter rise in sea level and a 1 meter. Alexandria, Port Said, many of these big cities are going to be underwater with one meter rise, and we're talking about a few meters. Not only will this impact the ports, the cities, and the trade and the economy, but we're going to result in also climate refugees. They have to move these people to different places. So sea level, I think, is the biggest problem when we're talking about cities in the Mediterranean and the impact of climate change on coastal cities. I won't go into this, just we also seen this before. We have these three factors which are impacting the risks. We have to decrease the size of these circles or these spheres. We have to reduce the hazards, reduce the vulnerability, reduce the exposure to reduce the risk. The risk is not going to go to zero. We just have to try to work to get this as small as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Bit difficult to continue after that. But it only emphasizes the crisis. And in the midst of the crisis, as I think we can already see, are cities, both as problem solvers and also as the vulnerable, the places that are getting the impact. And more than anything, coastal cities, obviously, because they're getting the burnt of the two sides, from the sea and from the climate. And now that we understand more or less the hazards and the impacts, we need to address the fact that cities bring their own weaknesses to the meeting. And in order to understand the vulnerability, the sensitivity of cities, I'd like to invite Orly Babitsky from Haifa University, who has just completed her master's thesis and developed a sensitivity mapping tool for cities, for coastal cities specifically. Orly?
So, thank you. I would like first to thank the distinguished speakers before, because you made the best intro to my speech. So now I'm feeling good that I can speak about, maybe I can move on and speak about vulnerability. So, sorry? Okay. So I want to talk to you about the coastal area, because we speak a lot about sea level rise and about the other climate effects, but before we even touch these phenomena, we have to understand the area, the coastal zone area, because we have threats, marine threats coming from marine environment, we have threats on land coming from land areas, and the coastal area is just, as we call it, stuck in the middle. It's an area that have doubled his threats, because he receives the threats from the marine environment. It's the sea level rise, and there's the storm surges that are coming, and there are threats that are coming from the land. If we have an extreme climatic event and we have lots of rainfall on the mountains and inside the land, the water, the runoff, eventually will come to the coastal area. So the main thing to understand here is that we are doubled our threats and our hazard on the coastal area. And moreover, this is the most popular area. 40% of the people around the world, globally, they live in coastal areas. Israel is much great number. People want to come to the coastal area. People want to live in the coastal areas. Tourism is in the coastal area. A lot of users are in the coastal areas. So this area not only is heavy development, you have the double of the hazards. So we need to address this area in a different way and maybe in more emergent way. Sorry. Colin talked about it, and I talked about it. 75% of big cities globally are on the coast. In Israel, 50% of the big cities are on the coast, so they will suffer the most. This is the Mediterranean, and you can see it, that even the eastern part of the Mediterranean is warming. Warm is energy. When the ocean is warming so much, the energy is captured, and eventually it will have to go out in a matter of waves, of extreme waves or sea level rise that will come to our coast. Sorry, I will do it fast. So, as I told you, the effects are doubling, and still we have on the coast of Israel. Security, ports, tourism, settlements. Everyone is on the coast, all these huges, and everybody's competing in the small coast of Israel, only 200 kilometers. Everybody wants their piece of the coast. They want to fish, they want to surf, they want to just be in the sea, and everyone's right, but we have to manage it and the climate change effect as well. So we have to have a different look about how we manage the coastal areas in the age of climate change. As I told you, this is all the uses in the coast, yeah? And we have to remember that in 10, 20 years, we're going to double the demand. Israel have the highest population growth in the OECD. We're going to have 16 million people wanting to go to the beach on a Saturday morning in 2050. There'll be less area because of sea level rise. The hot season will be much bigger. Will be from maybe April to November. We'll need more time on the beach. Everything is growing and growing the demand and growing the effect. So I have very few time, so I'll talk really fast about it. We're talking about sea level rise. It's change because it's politically correct, but we all know it's rise. Extreme sea level is a situation, it's a condition when the sea level is already very high and storm surges are coming, and in the same time there'll be a huge runoff from the land coming to the coast. So again, getting the coast stuck in the middle between all these phenomena. And it will end up in beach narrowing, it will end up in coastal cliff. Israel have 45 kilometers of coastal cliff, wow, in her coast, and this really is making the coastal cliff unstable. Floods and pollution, outlets, higher demand. And what I did in my master degree, I really wanted to see what is the vulnerability of the coastal zone. I will do it very fast because I ended my time. I don't know how. I developed a coastal vulnerability index. It's a globally used index. It's well known. I just needed to take it and to adapt it to the Israeli coast. And I really wanted something that will not be for the academia. This is a tool for policymakers. Anyone in any municipality, any planner, any engineer can take this index and he can by his own see what is the vulnerability of the coast and what are the parameters that makes the coast most vulnerable. I will just do, and of course I adapted it by knowing all these parameters about the narrow tidal range, high level of development, and all the other stuff. This is the CVI of Israel, and the study case was of the city of Netanya. Netanya is a long coastal city, called herself the Israeli Riviera because they have a nice tourism, but as you see in the picture, it's located on a tall, steep coastal cliff, which makes it very vulnerable. And I implemented the CVI on Netanya coast, and in the end, you see the most vulnerable area, and the conclusions were that we are already in a very vulnerable situation. And now we need to try not to have it more vulnerable or very high vulnerability, okay? And as Gideon said before, we have lack of data, and we have a lot of coastal development planning to go in the coast. So we have now to understand it and to make decisions, maybe hard decisions, but make decisions to understand that the coast that is very vulnerable sometimes need to be left alone. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So we are beginning to gather together our toolbox to enable cities to address the challenges of climate change. And as you saw in Orly's presentation, we've already addressed hazards. We're beginning to understand the sensitivity and the vulnerability. And if you remember, there was a third component, the capacity of cities to instigate change, to get ready. And we're very happy to host today in our session Mr. Stuart Sarkozy-Bansi, who is the Director for Policy and Financial Investment at the Resilient Cities Network. And the Resilient Cities Network is an example of many organizations across the world that are focusing more and more on capacity building for cities, with the understanding that cities are really the solution for many of the climate change challenges. So Stuart, the stage is yours.
Thanks, Orly, and thanks for having me. Very quickly, before I jump into, already showing me the time? All right. Deep breath. I'm going to talk about something very, very specific in terms of what we can do after hearing all of that. I myself felt my heart racing a little bit. Thank goodness there was a cartoon at the end, but I'm going to talk very specifically about this investment protocol for coastal resilience. But just to say, the Resilient Cities Network, just on that Mediterranean map, has 5 cities on the coast as part of our network who are dealing with this, thinking about it. Tel Aviv is one of them. So one of the ways that we work is to really share our knowledge between our cities. And this is exactly the point of like starting to turn the corner here. And I will say that in the negotiations, we're not talking enough about cities, period, and we're not talking enough about adaptation yet. It's better than it was, but when you see this kinds of information, you start to think, wait, mitigation will get us somewhere eventually, but we're going to have to adapt before that. And that's where we have really always from the beginning looked at resilience and resilience building in our cities as both mitigation and adaptation, but knowing that really we're going to have to do the pre-recovery work so that we're not in recovery all the time, because we're on a recovery treadmill because of what you've seen here. So we have cities all around the globe. I work at the global level, but sometimes swoop down to the local level. I was lucky to be in Tel Aviv for some of our work in 2017, as well as in Ramallah and a couple of other places, Luxor, Egypt. So very diverse set of cities all over the globe, most of them coastal. So this is not a conversation that we're not having in other parts of the world as well. Okay, so the investment protocol for coastal resilience was a way of us saying, globally, we're going to have the same problem. So what are the things that we can do? And this protocol is designed to take all of the data that you see and connect it with financing and do that in such a way that we're doing a few different things at the same time. So 3 elements that you see up on the screen right now are just kind of the summary of what the protocol that we announced this week and we first debuted at the UN Ocean Conference in Lisbon in June. The first was this blue tinted white paper, what I call the blue paper. It sort of sets the stage for where we are, on both fronts in terms of the sort of shocks and stresses, but also in the financing. How do we unlock the funding? Because obviously to adapt, we're going to have to invest a lot more. The second piece is the Coastal Resilience Fund, which comes in under the Resilient Community Impact Funds, which I'll just show you a few things of in a second. And then the third that we are starting to develop before the COP is a project booklet that's just going to start with 5 or 6, maybe 7 or 8 cities and projects, beginning in Africa, but moving out to the rest of the globe, and starting to look at very specific projects that solve these problems. And they're different in all cities, but there's a whole wide range of them, most of them unfunded and needing funding. The protocol sets up a kind of series of what we call levers, and those levers include everything you see there. So when we say coastal resilience, it means a lot. It doesn't just mean everything that was just discussed that we have to adapt to. The problem with sea level rise and floods and rainfall is everything from sanitation to your ports that were mentioned to plastics to, we can go on and on, right? All get affected by that. So we're not just adapting because water's coming, it's everything else that the infrastructure, cities, where most people are, like our CRO today, Chief Resilience Officer from Lagos said, she's like, we're going to go from X billion to X billion in population growth, and it's 30 billion of potential damage, but it's only 8 billion if we invest in it now. Which do you want to pay for, including the refugees that come with that 30 billion, right? If you don't do that 8 billion now. So these are the kinds of things that we're trying to do to encourage and bring in ways of implementing this. So the idea behind the investment protocol connecting to the RCI funds is to say, there's projects that do adaptation and mitigation. How do we bring together global funders and local funders to implement the resilience projects that get us to that impact? And in most cases, we're always looking for the co-benefits and the resilience value. Underneath there, we're trying to create a set of sub-funds. And in particular for this, our investment protocol that we launched at the UN Ocean Conference and then presented here in various sessions, including this one, my final one of 10 in 1 week, is to say we need funders and others to gather with us to do this, because Tel Aviv can't do it by itself. Neither can Thessaloniki or Athens or Barcelona, right? So we need to kind of like bring these groups together, and then in the middle, city, outside funders, local funders, together with the projects that have those co-benefits and make the difference in bringing, at least to some extent, the adaptation and mitigation solutions forward and get them paid for. This is a one-slide diagram of the investment protocol concepts. Again, I mentioned the blue paper, I mentioned the funding and financing, I mentioned the RCI funds platform and the assessment. And our hope is that as we're moving on, we're pushing out of COP, as you say on the right, to projects getting done with those funders and financiers to bring us back at least some, both on mitigation and adaptation. That's the hope. That's the end. I got my, thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing this with us. It's such a great opportunity to learn firsthand what are the available tools, and also the understanding that we're not talking about finances, we're talking about collaboration, we're talking about partnerships, we're talking about channeling the finance towards solutions, and we're getting towards the end of our session with a focus on solutions. We'd like to share with you 2 examples, 2 best practices from our cities, from nearly coastal cities. We'll get to that. But first, from the city that is also a partner in the Resilient City Networks and the chair of the Forum of 15, the city of Tel Aviv. And to present the city of Tel Aviv, Dr. Boaz Kedar, who's the head of sustainable planning at Tel Aviv.
Thank you, Orly. And thank you for all these eye-opening remarks. I'm going to go really quickly. I have a PowerPoint. It's not loading? Even better. Okay, I'll just wing it. Okay, hi everyone. My name is Boaz Kedar. I'm head of sustainable planning and energy at the Tel Aviv municipality in Israel. I'm an urban planner and architect. No one's perfect. And I sit within the engineering administration. And the reason I emphasize that is because I see design and sustainable design as a really important tool in for us as city officials to, like Stuart just described, to really get us prepared for the upcoming challenges that we're going to have. Oh, there it is. Accept. Okay. So you can't, I just want to run through the slides. No? So no presentation? Okay. Okay. I was going to show you guys some examples of actually three tools, three focused urban tools that we have at our disposal as architects and planners to cope with this new reality and in an effort which we call Cool Cities. So Orly presented before me, and I think Professor Price did as well. We had some assistance from the Goddard Institute for Climatic Studies in New York. And we asked them to project for us the number of hot days in the coming decades with two RCP scenarios. Great, thanks very much. That's terrific. So here's the skyline of Tel Aviv from afar. This is from the south of the city. And this is the type of plan that I get. I didn't say this, but I oversee the green building compliance in the city. So all the new plans of new construction go through me. So this is a typical plan that we're starting to see. It's 900 living units, dwelling units. It's we call this a very, very powerful plans, very impactful plans. They're very dense, and the impact on the city is quite high. So I'm going to talk about three things in the 4 minutes I have. One are trees and shade. The second are green roofs. I'm just running through the intro of a typical day in a Sukkot holiday that my daughter sent me from Azrieli Center. It's just a shopping mall. Our congested highways that you all know. And if the city looks like this now, this is what the city is expected to look like in the next 2 decades, even less. So we have an adaptation plan in place, a very good one. It's by the way, it's open source. It's open to everyone who wants it, and it's also available in English. Thank you, Oli. It had a great writing team, and this the bottom goal, which Mayor Huldai declared in Copenhagen just 3 years ago, is going from just over 250,000 trees to 350 in a decade. So we're already 2 years into that decade. I'm skipping the intro of urban heat island and so on. You guys know this. I'm going to skip the mapping part. This is the climatic projection that we got. What I wanted to share, I'm sorry this is in Hebrew, is on the very left in red you see the heat exposure. And in the center, you see the social sensitivity. When we juxtapose these two mappings, we get a vulnerability index that we can then use and see where we can allocate the funds to alleviate these stresses. So when I talk about shade, we have a great city, a green skeleton for the city, which are professional forefathers had the insight to put in place. And in the last 2 years, we've been advancing. We've been looking at the entire tree population of the city as one asset. It sounds obvious, but it really isn't, because when you map out the stakeholders of the trees in the city, you see that there's one department that plants them, another department which waters them and does maintenance, a third department which decides which ones will be uprooted for any new development, and so on and so forth. So looking at all these trees in the public realm, on the right you see, this is the same street. On the left you see trees planted inside the private plots which shade the public realm. On the left, you see an urban renewal project which just uprooted all of the trees. And another study I wanted to quickly share, done by a couple of researchers from the Technion, is actually they mapped out the shade effectiveness and shade placement along the streets, both from built infrastructure and from the street trees. And they actually gave us, on the very left, it's actually an effectiveness index for shade trees. So if we have the funds that we want to use for extra trees, we know where they'll be most effective. I have about just less than a minute, so I'm going to run through all of these. Your apologies. I want to show you one last thing. This is talking about methods for planting and pilots that we're carrying out. This, by the way, is an incredible Israeli IP protected product for street trees. It's called TreeTube. Look it up. It actually enables you to place a street tree in the street with the compact ratio of 94-96%, which your civil engineers require on both sides of the tree, without the root cavity being affected. And then we can get to projects that look like they do in the renderings. The very, very last, sorry, bear with me. I'm not going to talk about green roofs. You guys know about green roofs. I want to talk about this. 1 minute. We've started looking at other factors in the built environment that exacerbate urban heating, and we found that as the city is growing higher, with curtain wall based architecture, which are floor to ceiling glazing, we're getting all these reflections. And essentially, I don't know if anyone's tried shawarma when they were here. Essentially, when you're walking in the street nowadays, you yourself are the shawarma, because you're not only getting the heat from the sun from above, you're getting it from all sides, from the ground, really from all sides. So to alleviate that, there's a nice anecdote about the Walt Disney Concert Hall in Los Angeles, which had to be redone because of this problem. We are now mandating that all tall buildings undergo a simulation which actually assesses the future building's contribution to urban heat at the pedestrian level, and it's proven to be quite successful. I hope it'll prove itself. Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much. Obviously, it was a teaser for the next expanded presentation, but Buzz showed some of the parts of Tel Aviv's adaptation plan, but he did not note that the Tel Aviv adaptation plan identifies two key objectives. One is cooling the city, and the other is managing the water of the city. And the water of the city is coming from the sky, it's coming, as we saw, from the sea, but it's also coming from upriver, from the east. And cities are becoming more and more interdependent also in their ecological systems. And in order to show this interdependency that affects coastal city, we've invited a more hinterland city, the city of Kfar Saba, who is really responsible for managing the water upstream from Tel Aviv-Yafo, and has been doing very interesting water management planning in this case. So I'm very happy to invite Tami, who's the head of the Innovation and Sustainability Unit of the city of Kfar Saba in Israel.
Good evening. Thank you, Orly. Thank you, all of you. First of all, I have a disclaimer. I'm not a native English speaker, so please excuse me for using my notes. First of all, I want to speak a little bit about Kfar Saba. I don't know if all of you know us. So the municipality of Kfar Saba is all committed to conduct and to improve processes as healthy and sustainable. Thank you, Maya. And sustainable city, strengthening the values of community, society, culture, education, and the environment while providing economic strength. The city of Prasaba is one of the first in the country to dedicated an entire unit to sustainability. This is a strong statement of commitment to creating local solutions to the climate crisis. I don't know if you all see that our mayor was here in the conference. It's very important to us. Look, we promote a benefit living environment for our residents, and now and in the future. And all our budget of the unit is aimed at tackling climate change. The connection between sustainability and innovation enable a wide perspective of the some challenge of the city faces with a rapidly changing reality and better preparing ourselves towards them. Our activity focus on two vectors of action. Top down, we aim to promote responsible municipal policy in the fields of waste, energy, transportation, and of course climate change. We also operate on the country level, leading professional firms and setting example to other municipalities. We have a lot of visitors all around the country. In the past 2 years, the municipality has set aside significant resources towards better preparing the city for climate crisis impacts, as Oli said before, both mitigation and adaptation. During the last year, we launched a city-wide plan which has been incorporated into the municipal budget and allocated the mission of the unit of the city. The program deals, we choose 4 areas that we deal with. We have treats and greenhouse gas emission, and we decided to take 4 major challenges. The energy management, cooling, as you say, cooling the city, stormwater management, and community resilience. It's one of 4 topics we choose. We wrote a strategic plan and implement it into the budget, as I said before. Prasaba is, as I have started, I don't know if all of you heard about the significant storm that we have in 2050 in the city. It was a mini hurricane. I was outside during this issue, which it caused a great deal of damage at high costs. And after that event, it reinforced us to understand that we have a holistic approach to manage the storm water to deal with. Beyond the conventional channels of urban preparation and the infrastructure level. In addition, due to the flatness of the city and the stream that pass near, periodic flooding occurs in local depressions. Sorry, a little bit excited. Expect to expand with the city. Following this, Prasaba municipality implement innovation solution for managing the runoff. For example, we establish a biofilter system to treat municipal runoff. A unique system in its dual operational regain. It is a hybrid system for both stormwater harvesting and groundwater remediation. We have winter pool in the city. In the middle of the urban park, in the middle of it, there is a winter pool that I lost it, sorry. Park routing runoff from the park neighborhood when it's necessary to utilize an urban nature resource. We influence the public areas and urban landscape We promote sustainability gathering, community gardens, and restoration of local spaces in the urban sensory. And our flagship projects, if you heard about, is eliminating the use of chemical herbicides in all the public areas. One of my favorite example is that is a part of the development process of neighborhood in the East City, next to the open spaces. One of the less nature sites in the city is found. Beautiful winter pool, and it's part of the plan. The winter pool will be naturally restored to manage the neighborhood runoff and reduce the excess runoff will reach to Yarkon River and will save Tel Aviv. This is a plan incorporated with the Nature Parks Authority and the Regional Environment Unit. I see this is why, just a moment. It brings us together with the next authorities to sit together and think together of collaborate solutions and the same challenges. Climate crisis have no limits. We can say Kfar Saba can make it on herself. She is to cooperate with all the data she have. We talked about it before on data. Okay. So in this way, Kfar Saba show its commit and responsible to assist its neighbor city and downstream preventing floods. Thank you.
Thank you. On behalf of the city of Tel Aviv, I really thank Kfar Saba for adopting the water-sensitive policy. And to conclude, we've had representatives from government, from academia, from local authorities, and we also have a surprise to end the session. We have a representative with a solution from the business sector. So I'm very delighted to invite Dr. Jacques Amsalem from Albo Climate, who is developing remote sensing technologies to identify carbon sequestration along the coast, not necessarily the Mediterranean coast, but in particular the Mediterranean coast.
Oops. Thank you. Perfect. So I will be quick. I'm the last intervenant this evening. So my name is Jacques Amsalem. I'm the CEO of Albo Climate. We're an Israeli startup located in Tel Aviv. I'd like to thank Professor Price for inviting us and giving the opportunity to present our research and the abilities of our product. So at Albo, we're a small company of about 15 persons, and we developed the abilities of measuring the carbon sequestration from satellites. I think this is what is needed in order just to make and to scale all the carbon credit mechanism. I don't know if I can move to another. Okay, so we, the main bottleneck related to the development of carbon credits is related to the measurements of the amount of CO2 that is being removed from the atmosphere in nature-based solutions. And there are tremendous amounts of carbon that can be stored in the oceans in general, within the soil, and also above the ground. But the strong issue that we're having around it is, okay, I have a forest, or I am the Venice municipality and we have a huge lagoon, how my lagoon is sequestering. And then if I want just to monetize this sequestration of carbon that has occurred, and in fact these people are the good stewards of the earth, and they should be compensated for this, and we want to have more and more people getting in this kind of practices. We need to know how much they are taking out of the atmosphere. And this is what we're doing at Albo, and we are using satellites in order to do so, and we're doing totally in a remote way. So we're producing maps at the pixel level that you can see. These are examples, and we're scanning any area, in fact, on the Earth, including of course, I mean oceans, and of course, I mean the coastal areas in the Mediterranean. And we're able to calculate in a very, very accurate way the amount of CO2 that is being removed and stored in these areas. So we are reaching extreme accuracies, 85 to 95% accuracy, which is what is needed, in fact, in order to bring the right level of confidence for carbon credit buyers to purchase these purchase these credits. It's extremely scalable since we are able to scan any place in the world, and we made it in a way that is pretty much would call this an Israeli pride. I mean, that is able just to track and to monitor any sequestration of CO2 in the world without any dependence on climatic conditions. And the way we decided to tackle it, because everything is super interconnected, is to calculate this sequestration of carbon in the three big ecosystems that we're having on Earth. I mean by this, what is above the ground, we call it above ground biomass in our jargon, but also within the soil, and within the soil it's not so obvious. I mean that from satellite you're able just to identify and calculate the amount of CO2 that is stored 30 centimeters beneath the surface, and also what we call the blue carbon, that is the carbon that is being absorbed by the oceans. So this is what we're doing at ALBO, and I'm just running because I mean so we are a team of very how can I say very technological team, 7 PhDs in our team, mainly located in Israel. We have also part of the team that is in South America, a little bit in Europe and in UK. And that's it. So this is the end of COP, and hope that you enjoyed, I mean, COP27, and you enjoyed this small presentation on ALBO. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, our session is almost over. I'd like to thank all of you for joining us tonight, both here and on the air. I'd like to thank very much all our speakers, and I think that together we began putting a toolbox for coastal cities in the Mediterranean to begin addressing climate change and developing adaptation and mitigation plans. And more than that, I think we emphasized that the main essence, the main resource that's required is collaboration. Collaboration between the different sectors, collaboration between businesses, and collaboration between people, which basically is the theme maybe of this COP. So again, thank you very much, and hopefully we'll meet again next year with better understanding and better examples. Thank you.